Hey country friends, it's Rick. I'm back with another video. Today we're going to take a look at the Hotu color art markers. They're the brush and fine. I've got the 50 count set. We're going to look at these and I'm going to give y'all some tips and tricks for coloring with a limited set of markers. So those are the markers that came in there. They come in just random order. I did kind of go through when I unboxed them and put them in some kind of color order. You do get a swatch card. So I've already swatched them out on the card that they sent, which seems to be like a thick, possibly watercolor paper or super thick cardstock. I think it's more watercolor paper than anything. So we're going to swatch them out on a piece of cardstock that I normally use as well. So I'm going to swatch these out. I will speed this part up so y'all don't have to sit through me watching me do this. But they're a round barrel. They've got silver writing. You have a fine and a brush tip. And they are a Japanese nib. I think it said cotton nib on there. I'm not sure now. But I know they're the Japanese nib. They are reversible. You can take it out and reverse it and put it around. But we're going to swatch them out in the same color order that is on the card. So I will take and do this, and I will be right back. All right, I have swatched out all of them on marker paper. This is the Olo marker cardstock. And we're going to compare to what's on the swatch card that I swatched out that they sent. So you can tell that on the marker paper, and it's true with any alcohol markers, they're going to be a little bit different on the paper that you normally use. Like you can see that the Y314 is darker here, as most of the colors are, than they are on the marker paper. That's typical with marker paper, so nothing different there. But it's pretty close. So, and the caps aren't too bad from the color. You can see it's pretty close. Now, as far as the numbering system, the first letter is the color family. To a very limited color family group. You have yellow, red, blue, greens. You have your grays. You have warm grays, cool grays, blue grays, green grays, and black. They do have a 120 set. I think it's a 120 set. Also online for sale as well. I do have links below in case you're interested, and a discount code. I think you get 10% off your whole order. I'll have all that information below in the video description. But back to this. So the first letter is your color family. Then the next two numbers, they said, is the saturation or intensity. 60 is our next one, our next two numbers. So that is the saturation or intensity level. And then the last number equals the value or depth of the color. And the higher up the number here, the darker that value is. So see, we have G06 or G606. It's so it's going to be like more in a little bit over medium. 611 G611. You can see it gets a little bit more muted. Also in the pack, you have there's a little user guide, some coloring sheets that you can color, and it has some color combos. Although they didn't list the numbers on there, so that would have been helpful. There's also the QR code right there. I haven't tried that yet. Apparently, you will get to join the community, and there's some warm-up tips on that card. So there's that. in your little bag. So now I'm going to give you my little tips and tricks. I'm going to stamp out some images, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to use them. All right, so I'm going to show you my simple trick first for using a limited palette of colors. That if this is all you can afford, that's all you have. You don't want the big sets. You just want enough to color with. I'm going to show you what I do, especially if you can't figure out color combinations. I'm going to start off by coloring with my grays. So I'm going to use my warm grays because I'm going to start off with their skin and hair. And I'm going to do it more in a warm color combo. So I'm going to take and scribble off that number 6 because all I have in the warm grays in this set is a warm gray 2 and a warm gray 6. So that's my darkest. And by the way, they do cap either way onto your on the back. They post on the back. So I'm going to flick in a little gray where I want this, where my shadows are going to be. So I'm just using that darkest color first. So I'm going to add all those shadows in first for this color. Like I normally would when I'm coloring with a regular color combo. Then I'm going to take my warm gray 2 and I'm going to pick up like a tip to tip of that warm gray 6 that I have on my block up there. Or you could do tip to tip. Either way, I just find it easier to pick up the color off of a block or a sheet. You are going to have to do this a few times because that color will blend out pretty quickly. So I'm just blending that out with that color that I created, that mid-tone. I will do the entire thing just like this. I'll pick up in between to blend that out because I'm going to do this pretty close to one color. But I'm going to use a warm marker. That's why I'm using the warm gray. If you're going to use a cooler color, I'll show you that in another piece as well. If you're going to use a cooler underpainting, you're going to use your cooler grays. It's all going to depend on if you're using warm colors or cool colors, which gray set you're going to use. Now, I've got that blended out. For the most part, I can come back and add a second layer, and if it didn't blend too well, to blend that out a little bit better, because, you know, our markers are transparent, so they layer on top of each other. Now I'm going to take and blend that color out with just the regular, plain, warm gray 2 marker. And I'm going to leave a little spot for my highlight on my hair. Now, at this point, after this dries, because I am going to wait and let that dry, I'm going to go ahead and pick out the cool grays. I'm going to just do the cool gray 3. And I'll show you what I'm talking about, because I'm going to do this, little boy, little girl. We're going to do it with just the cool gray 3. So I'm going to start by just laying in my color first, that I'm going to have it where I want it to be the darkest. We'll go ahead and do our little wings, underpaint those. I can underpaint the shadows on their skin as well. I'm going to switch back to my 2 to underpaint that skin because it's going to be a little warmer. I'm just going to add it in where I want the shadows to be. Those holly shadows in my holly right there. Okay, now that should be dry. I'm going to come back over it and add a second layer, which is going to make it darker. So I'm going to flick out a little color so that it does give us a little bit of depth in our underpainting. So we have that. Then I can take that 0 and I can soften that edge right there. Soften the edge since we only use that one marker to underpaint with. All right, so my hair should be dry. So I'm just going to pick out a hair color. I think I'm gonna use R205. It's like a medium looking brown. And I'm going to use the bullet side. And I'm going to come over my image with just that one marker. And because we underpainted it with that gray and left a spot for our highlights, you can see there looks like there's more on there than what we actually did. Because our markers are transparent, the color that you lay down first, you can see underneath our marker on top. As long as you let that underpainting completely dry. So we'll finish off their little hair right there. Now I want you to see. You can see there's some values in there just with those few markers. And then you can always come back and give it a second coat where maybe you want it a little bit darker. And flick in a little bit more color. You can always add because it is transparent. So that gives us a little bit more color in there. I'm going to use Y314. And I'm going to come over the halo. And then I'm going to flick in a little bit more color. There. So that gives a little bit of a shadow in that halo. Nothing too big. I'm going to use Y900 for the skin. So we're going to start in our darkest area. And we're going to add that color in. to our skin. We come right over our area right there. We'll go ahead and do that little ear on this side. We'll do the little hands. Go ahead and do my little feet. And come back and give it another section of color. Over my shadows and get those to blend just a little bit better. Now, because you use the yellow, you could also use a violet as well for the underpainting of the skin. There's also that. All right, for our little wings, I want a light color, so I'm going to use R302. I'm going to add some pink into those wings. And do the other side. And come back and add a little bit more where I want it to be darker. Use my red for the berries. Just come over those. For our green, I'm going to come in with, so I'm going to add that right over my underpainting. For our little outfit, I'm going to go back to our 703. And I will color that in. Right over my underpainting. And it's not going to blend it, it's just going to glaze over it to add more value in there than what we have in a limited set of marker colors. So that's really all I'm showing you is how you can get depth and dimension with just a limited palette. All right, so there is our little angel with our underpainting. You can see how you can still have depth and dimension in everything just by using those grays and coming over it with just maybe one or two colors. Now, another thing you can do, if you don't want to go through all the gray process, that's cool. You can actually come in. So I will just take and pick out the color I want to use, especially in a limited palette set. And I will lay in my first layer of color. Just using what we have. I'm just going to lay that in. And then I will take and start flicking in another layer of color where I want my shadows to be. Making sure to leave our center. Make sure you leave room for your highlight, is what I'm trying to say. So there's one layer, and I have a highlight. Now, this is not going to be like a perfect blend. You are going to see, sometimes you can see some of the lines, but it will allow you to have a little bit of depth in your coloring with a very limited selection of colors. And this is actually probably the most easiest way to do it without having to know which one's warm, which one's cool, what color complements, all that. But we can lay in a few layers of color. And remember, because their alcohol markers are transparent, when you layer those colors up, they build in, they get a little bit darker each time you lay another layer of color on. So I'm going to add some purple right there in the wing. A little bit of color. I'm going to take my colorless blender and I'll soften that edge so that it just kind of blends to the white of the paper. Let's see, for our hair, I'm going to go with Y to 11. And I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to base everything with my lightest color. Just being careful. Add color right there and her little pigtail. Then I will come back and start laying in where my shadows are with our second layer of color. And I'm just going to do short little flicks. And then I will add a little right here. Get that out. Then we will add a next layer of color. I'll come back in and every time I add a little layer, I come in a little bit less with the color from the color that I previously laid down. I come in a little bit less than what I do with that next layer, or what I did with the first two layers. That way it gives me a little bit of a blend, and I don't have to do a ton of work. Then you can keep going as long as, until you get the value that you want everything to be. Just remember, you're coming in a little bit less each time you add a little bit darker into there. So see, we have a nice little value of blonde going on for her parts of her little dress. We're going to come in with that pink. Give that a layer of color. We'll add some subtle layers into that. And color these berries the same color. So we'll add another layer. We want it to be the darkest. And another little holly right there. We'll add this color, the G0606, for our little holly leaves. Couple layers of more color to build up a little bit more value. So I'm going to do it with the same color we did over here on the skin. We're going to use that same color, which is that Y900. We're just going to color everything, her skin, that entire color. Color her little feet. And I'll come back with another layer of color. And where I need my shadows to be, like on her little ears, around her hairline, little nose. There. Let's flick in some color. I'm going to switch over to the brush tip. And I'm going to flick a little bit of color from the underneath the hairline in there. So it's going to give me a little bit darker shade than what we just had. A little bit darker right there. Around her little hand. So that gives us 3 different values in her skin right now. So I can add a little bit more to make it easy. And remember, each time you're adding that layer, you're coming in a little bit less into that shadow area. So say we have a good range of values right there, which is that 1 marker. Now, another trick that you can always do is we're going to come back to our block. I'm going to scribble off some color. I've got the R703. I'm going to take the colorless blender, and I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to add that color in there. I'm just going to flick it out. You will have to pick up several times because it is a light color into a light color. But that blender, the colorless blender, helps to soften that color as well as you're moving it around. You're going to start where you want that shadow to be. And then you come back and soften that edge. And you can build these layers up as well with that colorless blender. Into your shadows. They're just not going to be as prominent. So there's how I use my limited color palettes of markers, or limited set of markers, to achieve some blends, not blends, but to achieve values in my coloring with just a limited set. Now, what do I think of overall about these markers? I think they're really good. I'm pretty happy with them. I would like a bigger set. I think they could have done a little bit better job with the numbering system and the grays. Like, see, you only have one BG03. I think they could have added in a little bit more. Or maybe just done the warm and cool grays. But that would be my only complaint, is I think that there's too much of a limited combo, that it's going to be hard for people to find color blends. That would be my only complaint. And maybe use a different sheet of card instead of watercolor paper for your swatches, so that you have a true swatch color. All right, but overall, I think they're great markers. And I think they would be great for someone just starting out in coloring, someone that doesn't have a big budget, to achieve some color combinations, just using the few tricks that I just taught y'all today. That's all for me in this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Stay crafty. Love you.